Excellent. So I'm seeing a lot more people in the mural now. Does everyone still have access, John?
Hi, Jamie. I haven't got access to the chat, so I haven't got access to the link. I think that's probably because of the way I've connected to Teams, but I don't know whether you can share it on the screen in front of us and then.
Yes. So I was going to do that also. So perhaps, John, you can participate by reviewing the screen and maybe commenting in the oh no, but you can't access the chat. We'll come to you individually, John, and get your.
Okay, well maybe I should log out and log into Teams another way. Is that better? Is there a better way of?
I'm in the same boat. I don't think you're the only one, so I can neither see the chat or the link. So therefore the link.
I will try and take note of your names and get you an email across with that on.
John, you've got an email already with the link in. I've just sent you one.
That's great. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Tim.
Sorry, if you've both been able to get access to that link then externally.
Yeah, I've just sent it to Ben.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we have you for an hour today. Can I please ask you to refrain from dragging the box of all the boards around, because it's needing locked. Let me see if I can lock it. No, I can't lock it. So hopefully we don't drag it around. So we've got you for an hour today. We're going to run through a couple of different questions. The themes are broadly around accessibility data. So over the past 7 weeks, we've been working with NaPTAN on how they may or may not wish to expand the data that they currently do in depth and in breadth, so adding more things to NaPTAN in both directions. What's emerged from that is a prioritisation on accessibility may fit well in NaPTAN, and another thing that may fit well in NaPTAN is emerging modes of transport, like the location of them. So in part one, we're going to cover a couple of questions around accessibility, and then we're going to move over to part two when I update it from part one, and we're going to talk about micromobility. I think in total we've got about 7 questions. So I'm just going to kick off in the interest of time. I've got some post-it notes in the right-hand side of the boxes here. If you'd like to grab a post-it note and tell us who's in the room, and I've put, if you're a local authority, tell us which local authority you're from. Likewise for LTA, or if you're part of another group, I've just put some groups in there. So see if you can find the right box for you. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
I think we've got a couple of notes that people haven't got permissions, or it might be oh, enter as visitor. Yes, you should be able to enter as visitor.
Yasir, do you know of any way to lock the board that we've got? Because it's quite easy to accidentally move it.
Yep, I'll start looking things down.
Apologies all. We thought this would be easy.
Technology's great, but it's very easily movable, isn't it? I did try to lock it down actually, Jamie, but yeah, he has got the permission.
Yeah, so sorry if you've put some post-its and they've all been thrown around. And we've got BCP Council here. What does BCP stand for? Birmingham City. I'm making that up.
I think
Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole, isn't it? BCP.
yeah.
Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole.
Yes. A couple of questions in the chat, I think, due to mural. It should look the same. The mural should look the same. Maybe you zoomed into a different area of it. You can zoom in and out. And what we're asking to do is is to know where you're from, what type of area of work that you're working in, and look to add a sticky note to that section in the first box for the question of who's in the room.
And we've got bus transport provider. Which bus transport provider would that be? We've got quite a good spread of people. Thank you very much for populating these. I'll give you another minute. I see a lot of mouses moving around. We've gone incognito again. Emma, would you be able to maybe start taking some of the questions and putting them on their own board, and then it might limit the movements that we've got. Apologies, everyone. Will work to counter this.
If you're having trouble with the post-its about adding one, there is post-its on the right, so you're able to just type on one and drag it across.
Excellent. And I see some people have also moved on to what data do you provide to DFT. So conscious this may not be a question for everyone, but if you are in the role of providing anything to DFT, just drop it in the column that your name's in. Jared, are you able to enter as a guest?
No, I'm on a mobile. This doesn't work on this, unfortunately. I can view it, but I can't add to it. So
No,
sorry about that, but I'll try and participate as best I can without interfering otherwise. Thanks.
I'll add you to the list. Excellent. So we've got some people providing bus stop data, timetable data, regional travel line, bus data, tram stop data. National coach service database. These are awesome. This is helping us just get a picture of the wider ask that we have of you. So just underneath here, if you want to put your last post-its on that board, this is for LAs and LTAs only. So I've copied down I think all of them. I've copied down all of the LAs and LTAs from above. If your name's not here, just take another post-it note. I'll give you some post-it notes. And I want you to pop yourself on that scale of are you rural, urban, or somewhere in between? Just an approximation. And I'll give you some post-it notes at the side if your name isn't there. And as you plot your name on that scale, just to the right-hand side, if I drag over some little dots here, I want you to, if you are collecting any accessibility data on any of the modes of transport, again, just LAs, LTAs, I want you to put a dot on your name. So just drag a dot over and drag it onto where you are on that scale. And we've got Joy. I cannot see the post-it notes. Let me help you, Joy. We've got some blank post-it notes here. If I zoom out on.
Sorry, sometimes I've had to renew the board, like refresh the tab, because everything goes blank for me as well, actually. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. Can you see anything, Joy? I think.
It might be a good idea to follow where Jamie's cursor is. If you've got maybe you can let people follow you or bring everyone to you every now and again. Mm-hmm. Does that work on Mural?
Don't know which one I am actually. Am I a snail? Oh look, I'm visiting snail. Ask to be followed.
Everybody follow the snail.
Everyone follow the snail. We'll get there really quickly, I promise.
There you go. And then it should focus onto where you are.
Excellent. Yeah, so we're just here then. If that makes it clearer for everyone. And what I'm saying is, if you get some post-it notes here, if you can't see any blank post-it notes on the bar within Mural on the left-hand side, there should be a little text icon that looks like a post-it, and you'll find some in there, and you can drag them to where you need them. But if you're still having difficulty accessing, please just do post in the chat. So Adrian, you still can't post anything. Shall I put a post-it note for you somewhere? Are you representing a local authority or something else?
He's from Dorset Council. If it's Adrian Glover, and we've put him in the sticky note.
Oh, perfect, excellent. And so we've still got, yeah, we've got a little placement here. Excellent. Rural. Transport Scotland, somewhere in between rural, urban. It's a mixture. These are excellent. So I'll just give you another 20 seconds just to if you're an LA or LTA, just to populate that, and if you're who's in the room, to tell us what data you've got. And I'm just going to, while I wait, I'm just going to clarify. We've got some pink dots here. This one says WBC. Is anyone able to help me clarify what that means? And WECA? I'm not so good with acronyms, so.
Sorry, the WECA is me, West of England Combined Authority, so it's to do with my post-it note.
Ah, perfect. And the WBC is West Berkshire Council, perfect. And Kent currently gather accessibility data. Okay, so I'm just confirming then, we've got a rough spread, everyone's somewhere in the middle between rural and urban, and we've got 3 either LAs or LTAs who are gathering accessibility data for some modes of transport. If that's incorrect, please drop it in the chat or make your way, follow the snail, make your way here and update that. I think we are good here. So I'm going to move us down onto my next question. So if you're following me, we're just going lower on the overall board. So I'm going to unveil this. So I've got a question here. It's on a scale. So I believe that government should set standards for accessibility data for transport nodes. And I want you to take a post-it note that's along the bottom and plot it somewhere on strongly disagree to strongly agree. And in your post-it note, I want you to tell us why. Why have you placed it on that spectrum at that location? And you can use multiple post-it notes if you've got multiple reasons. So I'll give you a couple of minutes for that. And for anyone unable to access it, feel free to come off mute or type in the chat and I can update, post it for you. And I feel like we should have some disco music in the background as we do this. That would help, wouldn't it?
Definitely, definitely.
If I zoom out a little bit, we're getting lots of strongly agrees. I'm just going to start voicing these over. So some strong agrees example to bring consistency, to set an agreed standard to be accepted by all data providers. Potential users need consistent standards. So lots of consistency required. Interoperability. Whoever wrote interoperability, can you help me understand what are the challenges of interoperability that you face? Maybe add some additional context to that so that I can.
Yeah, hi, it's Tess Harwood from the Bus Open Data Service.
Okay.
I wrote interoperability because we've seen so clearly, having implemented recently some new standards and be kind of working with a lot of different stakeholders, that for things to be interoperable is the end goal, really. And without some sort of standardization, it's just very difficult to do that at scale. And I guess if we're talking about it here, we're at least thinking at scale now.
Mm-hmm. So, and yeah, we've got lots of agreements, thank you. And so interoperability, we mean between different types of technology, different use cases to make it surfaced in different ways.
Yeah, effectively, you know exactly what you're going to get and exactly what you're going to give. And that's all fairly prescribed, which really helps to reduce kind of those barriers to actually using the data, because once you've set it up for one region, then you're set up for everywhere, is kind of the concept.
Excellent, thank you so much, Tess. We've got everyone should be able to travel as easily as possible. We've got the used to. Is anyone able to help me elaborate on that one? Who wrote the used to? I think we mean maybe the schema used to have that.
Yeah, I wrote that down some base up. So ages ago, there used to be IF136, IF145, IF156, IF157, IF160. It provided accessibility data at stops and provided accessibility level data at service level as well. It was updated about 2014, 2015, and then the DfT stopped populating it as a big piece of work that started before the Olympics. So it used to happen, but then it doesn't anymore.
You're right, that was launched around the Olympics, and I think there's definitely some barriers. And if I move over to this side, we've got a post-it note here, and when you zoom in on it, it talks about those barriers, so incentives and advice and support needed.
I'll just expand on that a little bit. So it's Ben from Bods. It's surprising it looks like I'm being a bit contrarian on this, but I think the application of standards could limit innovation and the flexibility of different providers to supply accessibility options. So I'd rather see that as being optional but incentivized. So it could be that local authorities or operators are measured on how well they offer accessibility and can be rewarded in different ways for that. But I think that there could be standards and support to enable local authorities or operators to adopt ways of working, but I think that it might stifle innovation and it might slow down implementation if everybody's waiting for standards or struggling to find a supplier that meets the exact specifications. I think that it would be easier and more flexible to offer a more open approach to accessibility.
Does anyone else feel similar to Ben?
I'm afraid I don't feel similar. In fact, I disagree, respectfully, of course. Innovation shouldn't be seen for innovation's sake. And I'll use an example, or why I'm sort of got that line of thinking. If you look at information for accessible travel on the rail network, at the moment we have a different document for each train operating company, a different way of presenting accessibility information, a different method of accessing it. And I don't want to sidetrack us, but this is why I'm thinking this. I think standards are absolutely essential above innovation, and I'm not quite. We seem to be going the wrong way around here. With the greatest amount of respect, the main benefit of accessibility information is people who actually need that information for day-to-day life can access it, and it makes sense to a consistent format wherever they're traveling. Not to sort of, and I'm not putting words into anyone's mouth here, but not to sort of cater just for the sort of quirks of individual app developers, because apps are only there to actually cater for the people that use them, not the other way round. So respectfully, I would disagree with that, and I hope I sort of made my point in a constructive way and, you know, not arguing for the sake of it. But that's why I feel strongly that consistency is very important above the suggestion that innovation is stifled, because sorry, I don't personally agree with that, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Jared.
No, great points. Yeah, the ability for apps to present how accessible the service is, you're absolutely right. That's something that you might need the data about the accessibility to be standardized. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
Thank you. These are really good points, everyone. Thank you very much. And I'll just let you finalize them as I take you down to the next one. So thinking about making it real, if accessibility was to be asked of the local authorities, and let me delete this, or local transport authorities to provide. But this is a question really for everyone. Do you think accessibility belongs in NaPTAN, and why? So find a post-it that corresponds to your yes, no, or unsure, and populate it with your reasoning. And I'll get you some more post-it notes. And if you're unsure where we are, I can ask everyone to follow me here, but I see there's a lot of people here already. And it would be great if you stay in the colours that we've given you for them. So green for yes. So I'll get you some more greens. Pinks for no, and yellows for unsure. And again, if you are unable to access the mural, please feel free to type, and I will make sure that they get into the mural on your behalf. And I'll give you a few minutes to gather your thoughts here. And I'll just keep dumping these. And Jared, I think you've got a legacy hand, so I'll attempt to put that down. So we've got a few no's. Let's zoom into these. Data is not about physical access points, so attributes of a vehicle should belong in the right data type, i.e. vehicle-based info should live in real-time information. And for the one about real-time information, then if it's a no, what about if you consider some static accessibility points like the, and also to the other point here about physical access points, what about some of the accessibility points related to infrastructure, like curb height came up in our research as a lot, shelter and seating availability. Does that change your vote here? Do you have any other, would you place that anywhere else?
Hi, yeah, that was Tess again. That was one of my sticky notes. It comes back to that interoperability. Each data standard and the aim of the data set needs to be clear and appropriate. We see that kind of sometimes you try and cover someone else's problem. So yeah, just making it clear that there's like a distinction, but actually in saying that, it's not just about having the vehicle information, it's about connecting the vehicle information to the stop information, say for a wheelchair user, so that that combination creates accessibility. So I guess, yeah, it's not just that knowing that the curb's going to be the right height makes it accessible. It's the curb's the right height and the vehicle can like take you.
Mm-hmm. And so if I was to follow up and say, well, if we were to think about the data under the control of the local authorities, as opposed to the service providers like the buses, which could be mandated in the tender process for a bus, does that change your mind on should that be in NaPTAN or not?
Yeah.
So I was the one that said data not about physical access points. The whole environment around the stop is a nutty question, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of authorities found it hard in the run up to the Olympics when the original accessibility data was being collected, because the public transport team doesn't know about the road infrastructure, and if it did a survey today about where there was a dropped curb and things like that, tomorrow somebody else in the authority could be removing that dropped curb, and so maintaining that data has got to be something that needs to be considered. I think it raises a very interesting question about how authorities can pull their data better together internally to be able to provide a better public service, but that's really challenged at the moment.
Hi, it's Eva Głowacka from Bots team over here. So by posting the question why accessibility data is important for NaPTAN, for a bus stop. I don't see this question anymore. It's somewhere above mural, but I think this is how I interpreted it. Are you assuming, yeah, belongs in NaPTAN and why? Are you assuming that if accessibility data is featured in NaPTAN, does this mean that the vehicle will be accessible to people? So have your research indicated that there's a very close correlation between two? Or you didn't think about this, as Tess and Tim indicated that it may not be the case?
That's a great point, Eva. Thank you for raising. In our research, we were specifically looking at infrastructure type data. In our discovery, we prioritized the purpose of NaPTAN as a scope mechanism, but we are conscious that accessibility data exists along that consumer experience chain, but it wasn't explored in the scope of our discovery. So when we say accessibility, what we mean is infrastructure type accessibility. So like bus stop infrastructure, for example, or rail station, are there steps? Tube stations, metro stations, are there steps? Interchanges, airport, tram, ferry.
Yeah, I do understand. So what's the next point? If you already know, as the researcher, that the scope is wider, but you only research the infrastructure scope, what is the next step from this? Because the reason why I'm asking this is there's a challenge that the next step won't be done, and therefore the discovery would be limited to a particular part of the scope, but it won't be explored in full. And from the board's data perspective, this is quite a big risk for us, really. So what's the next?
I'm happy to engage with you offline. I don't think the scope is limited from our perspective, but what we recognised in our discovery was the significant gap between the ability to provide a consistent standard. And now we're doing a mixture of further discovery and validation with you today. But if you've got additional research on that experience, would we be okay to connect after this call?
No, I don't. No. Sorry, I don't think I was specific enough. No, I'm just trying to find out what is the next step from this, really. But maybe it's too early to ask, so not to worry. I will wait for your findings. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. So I'm just going to move everyone down here. I'll request you to follow me again, and you can follow the snail. We're going to go a little bit lower. So we're now going to think, if NaPTAN was to hold accessibility data, what kind of things do we need in order to make that happen? So I've got some examples here. I want you to just drop post-it notes in here about any potential barriers, support needs, timescales, costs, things that worry you about if that was to go live. And I've got post-it notes just to the right-hand side. But again, if you are unable to access the mural, but you can see my screen, please do shout out or type in the chat. And I'll give you a few minutes on this.
Just for those of you without mural access, if you put your answers in the chat, I'll give it a thumbs up once I've captured it and put it into the mural so that you know it's being captured and in.
Thank you, Emma. And thank you, everybody. These insights are really, really good so far. And we've got a great post-it here about simplicity for the purpose of data collection is critical. But our experience has been that asking too much means that the data doesn't get gathered at all. And I was wondering if I can get some additional barriers around what prevents you getting the data or providing or managing or whatever the barrier may be. Roger, is it yours?
That was my post-it. We've had a number of surveys done by professional companies, which we have found we cannot trust explicitly. Most of the data is fine, but if 10% of the data or even 1% of the data is garbage, then basically it might as well all be. When we tried to send our own guys out, well, the first survey that we had something like 80 fields of asset data gathered. Incredibly detailed, down to useless stuff like the color of the insert strip in an alloy post, for instance. And we ran into severe problems. We tried to pare out the useless stuff and just get back to a decent core. We ran into severe problems when we tried to hand it out to the guys who were going to be on the road gathering this information, highway stuff. Effectively, we were training them for a whole new job there. You were looking at guys who might know a great deal about, say, safety, for instance, or would know a great deal about, you know, tarmac mixes and aggregates and so on. But they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a true form pole and abyssal pole at a glance. And if they weren't doing that job day in, day out, then it wouldn't matter if we trained them, they'd simply lose that skill. So we boiled it down to something like a dozen fields, which were really, really basic when we did our assets gathering. And when it came to the accessibility side of things, well, I mean, that's a whole other job in itself, doing an accessibility assessment for a site. You know, our bus inspectors are not qualified to do that. Our highway staff are not qualified to do that. So you have to bear in mind, what's your resource for actually gathering the data? We don't have any funding to do this, so we're just gathering what we can with the resource that we can. So we've cut it down to some really, really basic stuff. Is there any hard standing there? And is there a raised curb? So we're looking purely at mobility in this case. Of course, you can say, break it down to, how does this stop work for a visually impaired user? Does it have all the necessary you know, bits of tactile paving and so forth to make that work? Is it a talking bus stop, and so on and so on? If the person is hearing impaired, have we got the necessary information there if they can't communicate with other users? So you are having to break it down into different categories, I think, but the more detail you ask for, the less likely any of it is to be useful when you actually get it, if you get it at all. We got to a certain point and our highways guys looked at it and said, no, we're just not going to do that.
Got it, Roger, thank you. And Joy's also commented that they face the same issue, same thoughts. That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing. I've made some additional post-its around your one if you wanted to just have a read and validate them. These are excellent. So I'll give you just a couple of seconds just to finish off there, or share vocally some of your constraints. And there's just one post-it note in the top left, says misrepresentation. I was wondering if I could just get a quick clarification on what that means. This one here. If it is your one, I'll let you either tell me what you were meaning by that, or you can update your post-it note. But conscious of time, I'm going to ask you to follow me. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go over to part 2. So I want you to ignore that last question that we had. So if I zoom out, I'll show you where we go. We're going to go back up to the top, and then we're going to go all the way over here to part 2. So we're going to discuss micromobility. I've only got 2 questions for you, but it's going to be interesting to get your thoughts. Through our research, we learned that people have different views on what micromobility means for them and their community. And I want you just to take a post-it note and answer the question of, do you think e-bikes and e-scooters are public transport or leisure? And as you take one of those post-it notes, you can take as many as you like. Tell us what reasons you're placing it for on that scale. We've got some great ones coming out. E-bikes fit in well with existing transport if they're used responsibly. Incorporating in public transport will make them more accessible and increase awareness. It's open to anyone. So these are reasons why it should be public transport. If managed properly, they could very well be public transport and contribute to the whole multimodal thing. I was wondering, whoever wrote that, did they have any ideas on how we might contribute to multimodal thing, like when we say that they may be not mismanaged properly? What kind of things do we mean, and what ideas have we got for that?
Myself actually put that, yeah, it's really making sure that that if we do offer it as an option, that it's kind of linked into kind of multi-operator tickets, for example. So if there's a way of actually having it as an option to maybe kind of operate alongside kind of DRT and kind of tap off, tap on type technology as well, if that would be an option.
Thank you, Stuart. I've just added those points to your. These are great. Everyone, keep them coming. Potential first last mile, but unlikely to be suitable for people with mobility difficulties or small children. That's a really good point, and that did come up through our research also about the ableist nature of them, and also whether they're bayed or free floating, I think they're called when they're not parked, and they could be a disruptive to the pavement. And we've got someone saying potentially both, in between leisure and that. I think that is actually a great use. I use it for both. And then moving towards the leisure side, we've got reality for a small town. E-scooters don't play well with other modes of transport, too dangerous to mix with pedestrians, too vulnerable for on-road use, not suitable by large sections of the public. Fairness across the country. will it ever be available commercially in rural or suburban area with low use density? Maybe I could get your further thoughts on that one. When we're thinking about micromobility in rural areas or low density areas, what are some of the, maybe concerns or things that people say in the community about that, if you're aware?
While I
And
didn't personally write that one, I feel as if it reflects an interesting thing that's not necessarily an issue about transport itself, but the nature of how our sort of settlements are built across the country. When we think about suburban areas, they're specifically designed for the use of cars. And when you have to think about the solution to dealing with that symptom, it's a very, very complex one. So when we think about e-bikes and e-scooters, how do we create those communal hubs in suburban areas to actually try and increase that density? I think it's a much wider issue that doesn't necessarily stem from the type of transport itself, just how the country is set up.
I'm on mute. I think I'm off mute now. Thank you very much, Adam. So what you're saying is the way that the locations are designed, urban, it's basically easier to get from A to B in something that's not a car, whereas in rural areas, the way it's designed is it's much more spread out, and people have traditionally used cars in those areas, and because the area is large.
Yeah, I think it especially applies to suburban areas, and when you're really getting to that like urban rural fringe, how do you actually make sure that they can properly integrate into those urban areas, whether that's not just e-bikes and e-scooters, but thinking about like light rail and stuff like that. I think yeah, it's a much wider question about how our urban planning takes place.
And just while I've got you, Adam, do you have any sort of ideas from a micromobility stance how that could be overcome? If you were to say the solution could be micromobility?
I think it's about making sure that you can integrate it into other forms of transport. So this whole mobility as a service idea. So if you're able to have, your suburban area, if you're able to create the infrastructure like a bus lane, which could then take you to, a train station, which then you can go to the train station and then use the e-bikes at whatever location you're trying to get to. If everything is built around it, that's sort of an idea. So just making sure you're integrating your transport, your different forms of transport well, and also whether it's using a journey planner app or whatever, making those options clear to users, that these options exist and that they should be pushed as well.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. And if I zoom out a little bit, pseudo quantification, there's quite a lot of post-it notes in the public transport, kind of that half of the spectrum, so that's quite interesting to observe. I'll just let you finish off any final thoughts you've got on that spectrum, but I'll ask you to move down when you can. I'll ask you to follow me on the snail. We're just going a little bit lower on the board, and this is the final question for us today. Do you think you will have shared micromobility schemes in your area in the next 12 months, 3 years, or 7 years? So I want you to find the yes, no, and year that you think yes, no to, and just add some thoughts in there for why you think it will be or why you think it won't be. You can reflect on some of the barriers that you might face within your community. It might be distance, it could be other things like funding. So we've got some proactive communities. Kent are currently doing a scooter trial. It's already available in many other areas, particularly big urban areas where the trials are being conducted. A couple of pilot schemes happening in Tees Valley. And then we've got on the 3-year mark, it's certainly seriously considered. I was wondering if you can elaborate on some of those considerations that are happening in the near term for whoever made that post-it. What kind of things are putting it in the 3-year mark versus the 12-month mark?
I guess that's me here at Warwickshire. It's more the time aspect than anything else, and the resource to actually put on it, really, because again we're like a small team. We do it with our transport planning colleagues as well, but again, because we've got so many other projects on the go, it's just time. That's only kind of real, but our consideration, because for example, I launched an RMF DRT service, and it took me 2.5 years to get it off the ground. And it's and even without the pandemic, that's just the timescale it took to actually get something going.
Thank you. And then there's another one in the 3-year yes mark, maybe small local schemes in smaller towns, but unlikely to be viable in rural areas. I was wondering if you could maybe add some additional post-it notes to that about if it was to go live in rural areas, what kind of things would need to be true for you to consider it as a viable option in a rural area? And then we've got a 7-year yes one, possibly depends on what's happening in other areas. So whoever said what's happening in other areas, what kind of things are you looking for to give you confidence to bring it forward from 7 years to 3 or to 12?
Ultimately, it's just how successful schemes are in other areas. So sort of the 3 years was probably more on the side of a no, but the 7 years was probably more on the side of a yes, because there's more time for the other schemes to be successful.
Thank you. And what does sort of success look like for you? What kind of things do you look for when you say the scheme is successful?
Well, a few years ago we had a bike scheme and that wasn't successful, as in people basically knocked the locks off bikes, pretty much stole them, repainted them. They ended up in rivers, in trees, and I'm not exaggerating, to the point where it was removed. You still see the odd one about painted a different colour. So I think in South Yorkshire there would be a little caution on any schemes like that, and just to see how other regions sort of close by actually managed that, and well, if the kit actually survived.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. So I realise that we're at time. There's probably less than a minute left on the clock. I want to thank you for all your input today. You will have access to the mural after you hang up, so if you have some additional points, please go back and populate them in. But the insights that you've given us today are going to help us just understand about some of the considerations that we need to make if we were to roll these types of data points into NaPTAN, what kind of things might hold you back, but also wider considerations from a community perspective and way of looking at this type of data perspective. So you will possibly have the contact details for us already. So if following this session you've got any specific questions that you want to ask, please do drop us an email and we'll be happy to help and answer those questions. And just before I let you go, I'm happy to take any questions on the call from anyone.
I do have a question. Now, I guess the title of the session was Future of NaPTAN, and we seem to have focused on accessibility and micromobility. Well, understandable, obviously, very important. I just want to know if there's anything else in scope outside of that, because, you know, I mean, I think Gerard mentioned demand responsive transport earlier. Whether there are any thoughts about introducing other concepts to NaPTAN, such as to support things like demand responsive transport, because obviously that's becoming quite common and will become more common. And NaPTAN isn't really well configured to represent things like you being able to pick up a demand responsive service in an area rather than a specific geographic point. So I was just wondering if there's any sort of plans around, expanding the scope of NaPTAN in that sense.
Yeah, Stephen, that's a great question. Over our research, we came up with many different types of ways we can extend it. We looked at breadth, so what are the different types of modes that could fit in NaPTAN that it doesn't currently have, and depth, what kind of data might we want to go deeper on and have more about. And we prioritised it against the kind of common agreed purpose of NaPTAN. So when we conducted research, we learned about demand responsive transport. I'll defer to my colleague Sarah, she's on the call, about plans for the breadth, but in our prioritisation, accessibility was one of the ones that we're really interested to know whether it belonged in because of the pressing need for delivering a better experience for those users. And the second one was about micromobility, given its imminence at the moment, but also the fact that it's undergoing pilots around the UK. But it's not to say there's not other things prioritised. There's actually a whole backlog of things underneath. Sarah, is there anything you would add for Stephen?
No, nothing really to add. Yeah, NaPTAN redevelopment's been going on with the upload and the download sort of features, and bits of that in the backlog will continue. We've picked bits up as we've gone along that we'd like to address as well in the future. After this session, and this week is the last week that we have Deloitte with us, there will be a report produced, and it'll be something at a senior level that will be discussed, and we'll look at the strategy and how to move forward on the most prominent points that we need to work on for the future of NaPTAN, and that will be circulated widely as well when, one, the points of what we're going to address come out, and two, the report in itself.
Okay, thanks.
And we're just gathering the comments that you're making in the chat. Thank you for providing them. I'm happy to end the call there and give you back time. I did only want to take up an hour of your time. I know how busy you are, but if there are any more questions, you can raise them now, or you can drop us a note. Any final questions? No, so thank you so much, everybody. It's been really engaging from our end, certainly, and apologies earlier on for some of the movement in the mural, but we got there eventually. I hope you have a lovely day.